Yeah. No.
Are we doing a live chat or just
A video. A video because it's
Okay.
higher quality. It's a lot
Okay.
higher quality.
Hey, ah, oh, ah, hey, ah, oh, ah, oh, ah, hey, aho. Here comes Daisy. Daisy is the, what would you call her? Coyote. Meaning she is the abnormal one.
Yeah.
She's the spirit of the.
Hey.
Hey there, buddy. Hey, you good looking? How you doing? Yes. Oh, this is a happy dog. This is a happy dog. Happy
Hey.
dog. Happy
Hey.
dog.
He's
Yes.
good.
Happy dog. Happy dog. Yes. Yes. Happy dog. Happy dog. Yes. 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 Woof, 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 woof. Yes. 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 Yes, Daisy. Yes. Yes. See, Daisy can't ever be happy. She's just the upset one. With this guy, come here. Yes. Aren't you happy? Yes. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Come on, Daisy. Yes. Yes. Yes, the happy puppy gets the food. The ornery, obnoxious puppy.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
all right. She's all right. Daisy's all right.
Yeah, but all she does is bark. This guy, he's a happy guy. Aren't
You ate
you?
it already?
Yeah, he's done.
Oh my gosh. How do you eat so fast?
So this is sage.
Wow.
Sage is, see the smoke?
Oh yeah.
That is called smudge.
No. Sorry. Hey dog. It's good. You got the food. It's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Come here. Hi there, folks. This is your Sensei Al Bob, and you can find me on my YouTube channel at Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. But right here, right now, we're on John Birmingham's channel, and you can reach me at my Gmail, which is the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail.
Yeah.
So Smudge, Smudge brings our prayers. You know, when we
subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Subscribe.
go to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob and
In my
become
channel.
one of the adepts, one of the cadre, not a subscriber, a cadre. But subscribe to John's channel. How many subscribers you got, John?
It's not that important.
Well, you said to subscribe. How many you got?
Right now, I only have like 15,000 something.
Well, I have 265 adepts, the cadre. And back in the day, when the city-state found out, oh, I always forget which one it is. The one that starts with an S, who are all warriors. Oh, what were those guys? It wasn't
Mesopotamia?
Athens.
Mesopotamia?
No. In Greece.
Spartan?
No, it starts with an S. Yeah, Sparta. Thank you, John. So, did you guys know that Sparta was ruled by women? It was a matriarchy. It was known as the warrior city-state, but the people who were in charge were the women. And the way their city was built on a hill, and they cut these walls into it, and there was this big entry into where there's a big gate, and you had to come up. And when the warriors came home, if they hadn't won, the women would turn their backs to them. And so the guys were not getting to go home or go into their wives' boudoir. The women ruled in Sparta, not the men. It was a matriarchy. And all the other city-states that were pussies were patriarchies run by men, drunk, fat guys. And the women of Sparta were, you know, related to the women who were, what are the women soldiers? What was who's the woman in the comic books with the invisible airplane and
Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman?
Yeah, Wonder Woman.
Not
No.
Amethyst.
No. Wonder Woman.
One of
She was
those
an Amazon, right?
ISIS.
And what were the Amazons?
Before there was the bad ISIS.
You know, they were. Well, Isis was a goddess. What is your problem? This is the word. They don't like the word ISIS. Is that it?
I don't know. Who cares?
No, that dog there is the basic canary in the coal mine.
But that's sort of cheesy. That you don't say anything cool that's called ISIS as much, unless you know
the goddess ISIS. You know? Hey, a rattle is the most important tool in the shamanic toolbox. Hey, because the first two creatures on this planet were ant and turtle. Hey, come on, sing with me, Daisy, come on. Hey, so she's singing. Where'd the other puppy go? Hey. So the smoke rises and brings our prayers up to the great Maker. And we smudge ourselves. And we look up to the sky. And what do we see? We see this big chemtrail across the sky. And that's the ego of man trying to blot out love's co-creation of the photonic light. Because photonic light is what brings life, animates all our relations. And when you blot it out, you create dis-ease, meaning disease. And what is dis-ease? It is the lack of ease, right? And what is ease? It is the, spiritual connection of all our relations in love's co-creation. Hoi! Oh! And it's spring right now. This is one of the times I really, really like, because it's, I love times that are right in between. You know, it's still got a little coldness in the air, but the sun. But that chemtrail out there is like a lens. It's a piece of gray plastic getting in the way. Hey! Hey! And hi, this is your Sensei Al Bob coming to you on Dreamy Dream, which is John Birmingham's channel. And you can find me at Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob on YouTube. And you can get a hold of me at my Email, which is the Dude Awake 42.
So, is that the moral of this video?
No, I'm just still going on. I just started. There is, the moral. What is the moral?
Hi. Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Ho.
I'm filming him over here. Yeah. You want to be on the video in a far away shot?
Not right now.
Okay. No, yeah. No.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
How you doing?
I'm gonna take off to I'm gonna go somewhere.
Hey. You want to be smudged?
He's got sage. Yeah, no. Yeah. Okay. Oh, gee. No. S-H-I-H.
Sage.
Shit. Sage.
Sage with a G.
Sage. That wasn't. Yeah.
Sage.
Cursing.
Sage. And sage is one of the great blessings of the great maker. It grows across the plain. And the first time I ever saw sage grow that way was in New Mexico in the Four Corners. And there was sage as far as you could see, 40 miles this way, 20 miles this way. And you couldn't walk a step without stumbling into sage. And that's why they call it sage brush. Kind of brushes you as you walk through the plains.
No.
And it blesses you as you walk, as it rubs against you, right? And you would, like this sage stick right here, I bought it at the co-op. It cost $15. But when I came back from New Mexico in when did I go there with Red Bear and Tiom. We were scouting, and
did you ever go across country in the 60s?
Hundreds of times. I used to ride the rails. The first time I went to a prep school, and we were way on top of a mountain, and it used to be a golf course country club for the rich folk who owned the factories of Toy Town. And then Toy Town died because they made all the toys in Japan and then China.
Did you go across the country like the Muppets, like with hippies and stuff?
No, we were the hippies. We didn't know. We were the hippies, but we weren't hippies because hippies are people who shoot heroin in their hip. You know what we were flower children. We were the children of love. We were the children. It's the age of Aquarius. You remember that song? That was made 1965. You know, when the age 65, of Aquarius was being born.
That's around the time that all that stuff started.
Yeah, but it really started way before then. It started in Bohemia. The Bohemians.
The Bohemians?
Right, and before that, the Gypsies. Right, and before that, the no-names.
Yeah, my uncle said he was a gypsy, but he was just an Irish guy, man.
Well, a lot of gypsies live in Ireland.
He grew up on a farm in Ireland, but he would say that he's a gypsy. He wanted to be like a gypsy. He was like
the gypsies were there in Ireland big time.
Yep. I thought he was like a wannabe gypsy. I didn't think he really was a gypsy.
Well, pretty much everybody who came there,
back then, it would be like today, like one of those white rappers.
No, it wouldn't. A gypsy is
what my uncle was.
A gypsy is a royalty. A gypsy is a king and a queen. But that's why the Holy Roman Empire went after them, because they had the authority, whereas the Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire, had no authority except for their centurions. And then they rebranded themselves when they stretched themselves so thin.
But my uncle was just a good guy, a good person.
He was. You're talking about Uncle Jimmy?
No, Uncle Richard.
Richard. Yes, he
Yeah.
was a nice guy. I liked him.
He was a really good, nice person.
Yeah, he was a good guy. Did you ever call your dad a gypsy?
No, he doesn't want to be a gypsy.
No, that's what he really wants to be.
He's an all-American.
He wants to be a gypsy. Your dad came from Ireland as a child. He was the Born, the Borna.
Well, he's,
He was
he served
born
in the military.
under a
war
four-leaf clover, your father.
He's a war hero wherever you may or may not have been born.
Well,
in
that's
America or
that's
Ireland.
what the bards were war heroes. They were the warrior kings, the bards. When you hear about St. Patrick chasing the snakes out of Ireland, you've heard that, right? That's why in America they celebrate St. Patrick's Day, because he was a Nazi.
Who?
St. Patrick.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he genocided the Irish.
Oh, that's terrible.
And from the day that St. Patrick's went in there until 1988, when the Irish Republic signed the Maastricht Treaty and they became part of the EU, the Holy Roman Empire had been genociding the Irish. That's what the potato famine was. Did you know the potato famine was a man-made virus spread on the potatoes? Because by law, the only thing the Irish could eat were potatoes. I mean, they were the breadbasket of England. They were growing lettuce and carrots and cabbage and broccoli and everything imaginable because the land there is so fertile. And the only thing the Irish could eat were potatoes because they were carbohydrates, which gave them a lot of energy, but nothing to grow on. Oh, look. There goes an owl.
An owl?
Yeah, right over there.
Where?
It's right over there. It's already blown away, but the shadow came right
Oh, I
across
see.
us.
I see it. Way up there.
Yeah.
It's an owl?
Yeah.
If somebody can zoom in on that. It's a different one. It's like a falcon or something. Oh no, it's a buzzard. It's a buzzard. It's just a buzzard.
Is that they can appear to be anything. They are the mystery bird. They're a bird that crosses across species. They're not just birds. Owls are also dinosaurs. Are also fish. And also mammals. They are a spirit animal. Now, all animals are spirit animals, but the owl crosses all of them. And that's why my name is Sensei Owl Bob. You're griot. You know what a griot is? A griot is a person who tells you a story. Why you like my stories on John's channel, and you can come to my channel and see, I got 500 of these stories on Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Owl Bob on YouTube, and I kind of do one in the day, sometime between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., and then I do another one starting around 7 p.m. To 8 or 9.
Yeah. Well,
And a griot tells a story, and the story is seemingly a rambling story. Have you guys ever seen the movie Princess Bride?
Yeah.
Right? And how does Princess Bride start out?
With the grandfather narrating.
Right. And what is he doing?
He's telling the grandson the story.
Right. He's a griot.
Yeah.
Right? And when he starts the story, the grandson doesn't want to hear it. Right? It's not a video game, right?
Yeah. But
It's
we're
not
gonna
on a
have
screen.
to look at some older stories unless you do you want to tell a story now?
I am telling a story. See, that's what I'm doing.
You're
That's what a
starting to tell a
griot
story?
does. A griot tells a story.
Well, I'm gonna have to go upstairs while you tell a story.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going upstairs. I gotta buy a plane flight.
Can you
I
do
gotta
me a
get a
favor?
plane flight to
Can you move the
see my
camera
kids.
closer? Can you make
Yeah,
it?
I got to see my kids.
Okay. Bring the Yeah.
Houston.
right.
wherever.
Perfect. So I fill the whole screen up.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna tell a story?
Yep. Which I've already been telling a story. How long have we been talking?
A while. It's hard for me to tell.
More
I'm gonna go upstairs.
than 20 minutes?
Yeah, just
Okay.
I'll try. Just don't say any crazy R-rate like X.
Well, you're gonna edit this thing, right?
I might just put it up.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna say anything bad because that would basically put a bad light on your Sensei Al Bob. That you can watch me on my channel, Dreamy Dreamland, with Sensei Al Bob on YouTube, and you can get a hold of me at my Gmail account, TheDudeAwake42. So anyway, back to Sage. So I basically was going across New Mexico with Red Bear and Tiom, and we were the two elder scouts. We were like the diplomats of the Rainbow Gathering. We were the folks who first to show up, the last to live. The scouts to find the spot, the seed camp to set it up.
Well, this sounds like a good story. I'm gonna listen to it.
Okay.
Then I'll go buy a plane flight to see my kids. I've been waiting on for a long time.
Yeah. And so we were traveling around America, right? And we were before Thanksgiving Council. We were going around America because usually at the end of the Rainbow Gathering of the National, wherever it is, and the way the Rainbow Gathering is set up, it is set up that it is done in national forests, because anyone can go into a national forest and camp. You don't need a permit. You don't need to get a license. You're basically legally a free man in the national forest. And that's why I live in the deep green. It's a national forest. That's why I call it the deep green, because it's the national forest. It's not any specific place. So anyway, I had been involved in the Rainbow Gathering since its inception, but not really. Meaning I had friends who started. GB, Plunkett, Joni, Freedom, and Tiom, Red Bear, Water, who else? And most of the people who were in it, especially most of those guys, they were one of two folk. They were either what people like Spiro Agnew would say road dogs or hippies. And those are two very derogative terms. Hippie, like I said, is a person who shoots heroin in his hip. And the reason Spiro T. Agnew, the vice president to Nixon, used that term to besmirch the anti-war movement was because he had been a hippie. The movie Ignoble Bastards by, what's that guy's name?
Eli Roth.
No.
Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah, that was done by...
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, Tarantino, right? And Tarantino did that movie because I love Tarantino. He's one of the first people who really represented the Mandela effect, in that his movie has got like 6 little movies in it. First just about this guy, Pulp Fiction is a great thing because it's a story about the character, the black guy, and the guy who went to Europe and
Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta.
Right, those two guys. The movie was about those two guys, and then it was about Willis, the fighter.
Bruce Willis.
Yeah, Bruce Willis, and then it was about the kingpin, that the black guy who was the boss, the drug kingpin, that what's his name and what's his name.
He's good. He's good. Look, she's a bunny. She's a bunny. She's innocent. She's like a bunny rabbit. She's gonna lay an egg. Wait, she's good. She's good.
Great Maker, hear our prayer. So, Ignoble Bastards was a real cinematographic tour de force in that it truly said, hey, this is the Mandela effect, because it showed an alternative outcome of World War II,
Yeah.
right? And
She's a bunny.
So you can tell the story. I'm just getting different shots as you tell the story.
hey, hi, this is your Sensei Owl Bob, and you will find me on my YouTube
Okay.
channel,
We got the
Dreamy
commercial.
Dreamland with Sensei Owl Bob on YouTube, and I do a show at in the morning, sometimes after 8 a.m. till sometimes around 2, and in the evening, sometimes from 7 p.m. to starting from 7 p.m. around 8, depending when I get to it, and it goes to 9, 9:30, 8, 10 o'clock, and you can get a hold of me at The Dude Awake 42. But here we are on John Birmingham's channel, and this is my show on John Birmingham's channel. It's called Dream Time. And what is Dream Time? Dream Time is when you go to sleep, right? And your body kind of shuts down. This thing is your avatar. This isn't who you are. This ain't me. This ain't me. Who I really am is my conscious free will, my ascending conscious free will. And that's why we have these chakras that are like the low vibration chakra, the stomach chakra, the heart chakra, and then all of the other chakras up to our crown chakra, and then the golden thread that goes into our Akashic record, right? So when you go into dream time, what happens is all of your autonomic system is like the automatic pilot. So when you go to sleep, it plugs in. And so your avatar, your body, this crass material thing, right, that really doesn't mean anything. Buddha was at the side of the road, and he was like this luminescent, phosphorescent creature, and a traveler, crass creature, came by, a merchant, and said, "Whoa, man, are you God?" And Buddha kind of looked at him and said, "No." "Well, man, what are you, a magician? What are you, man?" And that's how people talked in China back a long time ago. Because most crass creatures talk like that, no matter what race they come from. Because back in the day, we were all telepathic. Back in the day before the Tower of Babel, no one lied, cheated, or stole because everyone was telepathic. You knew whether somebody was lying, cheating, or stealing, so you couldn't, right? And the other thing was that we lived on a planet, which we still do live on, a planet of abundance, meaning you don't have to go to work. You don't have to go, how am I going to pay my bills? Because back in the day, everyone shared. And it wasn't communism or socialism, no. Because capitalism is, we don't live in a capitalist state. We live in a corporate, fascist, communist state. Because who gets the welfare but the corporations? Who got the big $1 trillion tax break? Not you and me, no. The really rich folks and the corporations. Who, in 2008, after all the banks crashed the economy, who got bailed out? Was it the poor little guy who couldn't pay, who was over his head in his mortgage? No, the big banks. And all they did with that money was buy out other banks. So now there are like two people running the money. And, the Federal Reserve, the entity that prints your money and, defines the economic system is the Federal Reserve, and it's a privately held stock corporation. You know? You are a slave. And when you burn sage and use the rattle, it breaks the harmonic of that. You know? It takes you away, puts you in that place of all our relations where everyone is one, right? One, right? And so there we were, you know, Red Bear and T-Om and I, and T-Om's girlfriend. T-Om had fought in World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War. He was, you know, he had every medal except the, because he refused it, the Medal of Honor. He didn't want the Medal of Honor. He took all the others. And he didn't think he was anything special. And he took the other medals because they represented his friends who died and really sacrificed. And that's what he did with all his medals. And all the kind of money he got from all of that, he gave back to, you know, anti-war movements, and really real ones, like the ones run by the soldiers. You know what happened? You know why the First World War just ended, stopped, right? Because the whole World War was a vehicle of bankers that basically were just scooping up nation states. And Germany and France and England, I mean, England was about to lose. That's why, you know, Rothschild forced the Americans into World War I because, you know, Donnie Trump goes on about fake news. Well, we've had fake news from, you know, back in the day when they invented papyrus, you know, and all our civilization is always destroyed. You know, Thucydides was the father of written language as we know his story, right? And someone once asked Thucydides, so Thucydides, what's written history? And Thucydides responded, whatever the Romans pay me to write. And that's what our media is. It's owned by 6 corporations that's controlled by 3 entities, right? And whether it's MSNBC or CNN or Fox, they're saying the same thing. You know, distrust your brother. Distrust, you know, and Thanksgiving dinner, just have an argument, you know. Distrust your neighbor, right? I have to fill out a lot of forms. Like these, see these shoes I got here on my feet? It took me 4 weeks of filling out forms, you know? And every time it said race, I would put human. And the bureaucrats would have a fit. You have to be something. So I would put, you know, trapezoid, purple, you know, fish. You know, oh, what's that? You know, or I would put in African. You're not African American. So I then would put in African American melanin challenged, because we're told that we all come from Africa, which is a lie. We don't. We come from Lemuria and Atlantis, and those powers still exist. You know, who do you think's out there in the South Pole? You know, in that continent that we're not allowed to go to, right?
Santa Claus. Santa Claus.
Santa Claus, no. He lives on the North Pole. Santa lives on the North Pole.
Okay.
The South Pole is where the, you know, and there's a island bigger than New Zealand off south west or southeast of Australia. And if you go back and look at old maps, there's the island.
It's amazing.
And the new maps don't have it. And that island is where Lemuria is today. Still is.
Okay, what about the story?
I am telling the story.
Okay.
This whole thing is a story. This is what a griot does. A griot kind of rambles through time and space in a way that most people aren't used to, because you are pulled by the ring in your nose to look for the beginning, middle, and end. And there is no beginning, middle, and end, because the Alpha and Omega, like the Big Bang, right? And it's supposed to be expanding out into the universe. But we live in a alleged universe of entropy. So if that was true, that expansion would slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, and then come back. And that's what they said would happen. But once we got instruments sensitive to really measure that, we realized that in actuality, the Big Bang, if it is going further out and going faster. So that totally goes against entropy. And they can't, because if you can prove scientifically entropy doesn't exist, that's when you realize that we don't live in a universe of scarcity. We live in a universe of abundancy. Gene Roddenberry started Star Trek for a reason, not just to have, wagon train in space, but he wanted to show the general public this is what already exists. Because look, you had the communicator, 20 years later, what was that? Or not even 20 years, like 15 years later, what was that but the flip phone? The replicator, right? What is that but a 3D printer, And we already had all of this. We had abundance. We had total unlimited energy, instant, the teleporter, going from point to point, right? We have that. Tesla developed it in the 1870s. And our history is a one big lie. As Thucydides said, whatever the Romans pay me to write. That's why it is his story. So, back to New Mexico in the...
What do you think is more accurate? Ancient history, or the history of the world and history in general, or the account of the Bible that was written?
All of it is a
Supposedly
lie.
it's history.
And at least...
What's more accurate?
None of them.
Do you believe that Jesus existed on Earth?
Well, Jesus is still here right now. He didn't go anywhere. He stayed here. And Jesus was here before what the Catholic Church says. They just put him there for a business reason. Jesus is not a person. Jesus is your better self. You know that Daffy Duck cartoon where, there's Daffy going, and on one shoulder there's an angel, and on the other shoulder is a devil. And every nanosecond we get to choose whether to be Jesus Christ or the devil. We got that choice. That's what's going on here. Forget, now the Bible, and not the New Testament, but the Torah, which you have to read in Greek, right? And if you read it in Greek or Hebrew, but Hebrew has been stepped on, but Greek, read it in Greek, Old Greek, meaning from back in the day. And it's in, if you go on Google and say, I want to read the Torah in Greek, bingo, it'll be right there. And what's the amazing thing about it is that within the Hebrew nation, because Hebrews aren't Jews. Jews are a more cultural dynamic. Hebrew is almost a genetic thing, right? And so, because the Jewish people that name came to them in Europe, not in, the Semitic lands. And, their brothers, like the Palestinians are the Jews' brothers. And who do you treat the worst but somebody in your family? And they're Semitic. You're being anti-Semitic. Anyway, we won't go there for the moment. We'll go back to at least Jesus. So Jesus is always here. And he was always here. And that's why, in the Holy Roman Empire, they tried to describe it as the Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, right? Well, all three of those things are one. They're not three separate things. They're one.
So how does it tie into the story of you going across country and stuff?
Well, so I'll just leave the fact that if you really want to know about Jesus and want to know about the Bible, and John asked me a question. So when someone asks me a question, I kind of try and give a rudimentary griot answer. And that is, you have to read the Torah in Greek, and you have to use Kabbalah, because Kabbalah is like the magic decoder ring. Because, there was what was that movie by Kuntz, the something mystery? Da Vinci Code, right?
Oh,
Da Vinci
I guess
Code.
he wrote that. I wasn't
So
sure.
that's the Bible. And Da Vinci didn't, Da Vinci just noticed the code. He didn't write it, right? And people like Newton also, there are all these people who were alchemists. And what are alchemists? But people who turn base metals into gold, right? Now, base metals is us. This bag of water, this mud puppet, this avatar that the Anunnaki created and put our souls into to incarcerate, because they were scared of our conscious free will's ascension, because they can't do that. And a good deal of the dimensionals and extraterrestrials, and they're not even, see, all of those terms are irrelevant, because these things have always been here. We are them. We are the extraterrestrial. At least our avatar is the extraterrestrial. So there, Red Bear and Tiom and I and Tiom's girlfriend. And Tiom always had a girlfriend who was like, and she was not, wasn't like, oh, that's Tiom's girlfriend. No, whatever female that was traveling with Tiom was part of the crew. She had equal responsibility and authority. She wasn't like the woman. No, she was, one of us. It's just that Tiom was like, would find our other member, because he was so way older than us, so way, experienced than us. At that time, Red Bear was, how old was Red? Well, Red Bear was probably my age, or a year or two younger, or a year or two older. We were in our late 20s, early 30s, right? And this is before I met Donna on the subway, the first time I was a scout. Anyway, so there was a gathering, and it was the beginning of the falling apart of the Rainbow Gathering. And things don't just fall apart like that. It takes a long time. And see, the thing about the Rainbow family of living light didn't start with those white yahoos that started doing it. No. It came way, 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 way in the way past, when the elders, the old ones, were around. And they set into motion the creation of this tribe. And it was not even a tribe, it was a peoples, right? And it wasn't even a peoples, it was all our relations. And what happened, why it manifested in the late 60s, early 70s, is that the time was right, meaning it was starting to be felt within the United States and Europe after the French Revolution, and then the Civil War, and then all the wars that England had. Those wars not only make money for banks and kill millions of people, no, everything has an unexpected consequence. And so this quote unquote new age has been percolating. And it's not what, the new age movement is, because the new age movement was something, thought up by people in the Tavistock Institute to quiet that movement of change and gave it a phony representation, And that's why people go to Amazon, because they feel this lacking and they want to find something to fill that hole. So they buy useless stuff. And that useless stuff comes from, they rip the raw materials out of the ground. They send it to slave states like somewhere in Africa or Asia, China, and those slaves make the useless stuff, and it's sold around the world for people to try and fill that hole. And they never can, so they buy more and more useless stuff. So the rainbow...
What if you're buying cat food or things that you use for work on Amazon.com?
Well, it's again, the whole thing of dynamics is like a hammer. Hammer is a tool that can be used to build a house, or it can be used to knock yourself out or somebody else as a weapon. So anything used in an appropriate way, like sage.
I'm enjoying this. It's a beautiful day out.
Yeah, isn't it a beautiful day? And that's part of what the griot thing is, John. I'm telling this story so you can enjoy the beautiful day.
Yeah, I'm not worrying
About anything, right? You're not thinking about anything. Right, yeah, right, exactly. And that's what a griot does. It tells you this meandering story, right? And it kind of hits all these little parts of your psyche without me saying, oh, think of this, oh, think of that. No, I just kind of lay it down, right? And for the next rest of your life, these little things that I'm laying down into your consciousness will be representative for the rest. It'll change your life. And so when you consciously go into dream time, that's when you have cognitive dreams. That's like when you're awake while you're dreaming, right? It's like so you can, experience yourself flying. Oh, I want to fly over here. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? Lucid dreaming, right? And when you go to my channel on YouTube, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob, especially in the evenings, I do this story. And before I do it, I go into a shamanic state. And I put that energetic onto the show. Now, that's why I brought the sage and the rattle and the magic fire stick, because that helps bring that shamanic energy without me having to. John said, oh, let's do a thing. So I kind of said, sure, John. So instead of spending an hour and a half meditating, I came with the sage and the rattle and got into the state as I was telling this story. And that's why you like my show, Dreamtime with Al, or I don't even, what was it called on your thing? Is it just Dreamtime?
On my channel,
yeah, on your
it's
channel.
Called
Dreamtime.
Time.
Right. With Al, or just
Yeah.
Dreamtime? Okay. Well, that's my show on John's channel. And why, 60, 90,000 people have watched the old crone and the Jimi Hendrix and the ceremonies and all the other stories I've done, the JFK story, the Scar story, the, the white northern, what was that one called?
Nordic Alien.
Nordic Alien.
Nordic
Right.
Alien, that's a really interesting one.
Right.
About how you met a Nordic alien at some festival that you were helping put on.
Yes, the No Nukes Festival in Battery of New York City. In a city of millions of people, we put on a gigantic anti-nuclear rally in what was then called the Sandbar, because all the dirt they dug out to put up the two World Trade Centers, they kind of started this thing, and they dredged out, and they were going to build a marina with all these fancy condos, and then the Depression of 1971 hit, and that's the thing that precipitated Richard Nixon getting deposed, because he did certain things to get elected for his next term, which really is like what DT has done, meaning they're not going to find really anything he did. Now, Russia did all these crazy things, and so did a lot of other people, but Donnie not so much, because he was schooled by Mr. Cohen, the guy who brought us Senator McCarthy. Anyway, back to the fields of sage with Red Bear and Tillon. So that summer, the National was, where was the National? Oh, somewhere in New England. And at the end of every National, as the cleanup crew is doing that, or just before, while people are leaving, there's the council. And the council's first thing is to like say, okay, how did this gathering go? What's the good things? What the bad things? What should we do better next year? And
Did you ever think a long time ago maybe you'd meet some younger person that you'd help teach how to do things like as a like not a sage, but like what do you call it, like a sensei to like some younger person?
John, I've been doing that my whole life.
Did you ever think
I
you'd
have
teach,
more
like,
than
special
1,000.
person like me?
Again, if you come to
Like
my
who was,
channel,
like,
Dreamy Dreamland with
middle of the
Sensei
ball
Al
path.
Bob, and hit that thing and become a cadre,
Boy,
there are
what's it
300 of folks who are there. They're all adepts. They're all becoming.
It's still
They're
filming.
all becoming.
It said it almost turned. It just said it has 20% battery.
Okay.
But do you think maybe that like I've spent the most time around you as a young
No, of course not.
person?
No,
You
no,
just
no.
wanna- Oh, okay, never mind.
There are people who spend way more time than you
Okay.
because they were there. Meaning every second that they were there with me, they were in state. They were
But you helped
consciously.
me to become a more
Yes.
kind person again.
No, John, that's who you are. I didn't
Yeah,
teach
that's how
you.
I was
That's
before. That's
that's who
how I
you are,
was.
buddy.
Yeah,
that's who
that's-
you are.
That's how I am now.
No, that's who you
But for a
are.
while, I was kind of a jerk.
Only because you were
Really hurt.
traumatized by the situation.
Okay, you're doing something about the stage. I don't know what video I'm going to put up today, because this one was supposed to be one big long video. Now I have to edit it.
Okay. Well, you're the one who brought up the.
Well,
Every time you bring up a question, that's what happens.
Well,
We interact.
It had a thing on the screen that said that it was the whole screen was blurry. I couldn't see it, and it said something battery left. I couldn't even read what it said. I had to take it off the screen.
Okay, I'll wrap it up quick. Okay, no, bringing a question in that I'll
Okay.
have to go someplace over here, right?
No,
I'll just finish up the story.
yeah.
Okay. Hey, hello, everyone on John Birmingham's channel. This is Sensei Al Bob coming. My show on John Birmingham's channel is called Dreamtime with Al, and I have my own YouTube channel called Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Owl, OWLBOB, Al Bob. And you can reach me on my Gmail account, thedudeawake42@gmail. But I have been telling you a shamanic griot's tale, which is the vehicle. It's like the magic carpet through your consciousness, right? And that's what the griot does. It brings out all kinds of little things in your consciousness that you normally don't even think about because you're so distracted by the squirrel in the metal cage of the Rolodex of your mind that you don't see what's important, because the only true thing that exists is love's co-creation. And this is a rattle. This is the most sacred instrument because it's the first. Actually, the first instrument was two sticks hitting each other. And this is sage. See how it smokes? Sage creates smudge, which clears our chakras. That's why you smudge, you brush the smoke up and down your chakras to clear them out so they can open up, so your diaphragm can lift, and so you can breathe in, right? Breathe in that sage. And you breathe in the prana, that light from the sun, right? Which is photonic light, which if you've ever seen a film of how mitosis, the cell splits, it splits, and you can see the DNA being ripped apart, zipped apart by the RNA, and around the cell is your mitochondria, and it's like little lightning bolts. And that is the prana, right? That is the photonic light. And that's why they spray chemtrails to put up a plastic sheath so that energy can't get into you. So you will become basically a mud puppet. And so back, I was telling a story about how Red Bear and T-Ohm and I were scouts for the Rainbow Gathering, right? And usually the state, at least, is picked where the gathering is going to be. And then the people from that state, and usually, a group will come from that state to the national, and they, at the council meeting at the end, people who want the gathering to be in their state will say, hey, we want you to come to our state and we'll facilitate it, and here are some sites we've looked at. And so that, the 5 or 6 different states will say, hey, let's do it here. And if they haven't done it before there, well, that's usually the one that gets it. If it's, some states have had it 3 or 4 times, and like Colorado, Nevada, the western states, California, have had it a number of times because there's loads of places of national forests that you can go, whereas the East, not so much. Now, the East, Massachusetts and Vermont and a few other, Illinois, a few other states have national forests, Maine, and so they've had a number of gatherings there, Pennsylvania. So that's how it's picked. And then when the council decides, the scouts, like Teom, Red Bear, and I, would go to that state, to those folks. We get all their phone numbers and where they live, and we would come visit, and they would show us the sites. And we would take pictures, and we would get maps, and we would figure out which site has water, which site has, the highway nearby, which site can we get food, all of the kind of things you need to have for a gathering that even the state may not, because having a regional where 3 or 4 people show up, or 100 people show up, or 1,000 people show up, is not like a national where somewhere between 20 and 40,000 people show up, right? Because you build a city out in the middle of the national forest.
Was this the first Rainbow Gathering?
No, this was about the 12th.
Okay.
Right. So
you helped put on one of the first Rainbow Gatherings.
Well, the 12th.
Wow.
I was not quite involved in the early part. I knew all the people who did
Was
it.
it in
They were my
65?
friends. But I didn't want to. I wasn't a camper. I
What
grew up
year
in.
was it?
Again, like I said, late
80?
No, 70s or 80s, either before 77 or before 80, or before
Maybe
81
70s or something. Okay.
Anyway, somewhere in there. So figure out when the first one was and add 12, and that's when it was. So anyway, we go out because at the end of the national, in the council, there was no consensus of where to do it. So there were about 5 states in the West that wanted it, and there was no consensus. So it was up to us to go and look at all these sites, visit all these people, and and that's what we did. And we had there is no budget for this. So we basically hitchhiked from Vermont to, it might have even been around here, because we got on a rail around here and just stayed on until we got to Las Vegas and got off in Las Vegas. Anyway, and we went and visited some friends at Teom in Las Vegas and had a good time, and then we started hitting the different states. So we were in New Mexico, and we were down near the Four Corners, and we were, and again, it had to be, well, I can't tell you when it was, but it was before New Mexico became what it is now. But it was like, the only people in New Mexico were the corporate folk and everybody else who was poor. And so we were out in the Four Corners, and Red Bear was, Sioux. And and he was really, you couldn't miss him as a Sioux. And so we could pretty much go to any res and have a place to sleep and eat, even though Teom and I were, But a lot of people knew Teom because he hung out with, he's the guy who taught me my 3 rules of Dr. Heal doctor, do no harm. Don't get involved unless you're going to have a positive outcome and to take care of the innocents and get them out of harm's way. And don't get involved unless you can learn something. He was the person who taught me, not by me telling him, him telling me this, but by the life he led. And that's how you teach people, by example, not by, turn to page 35. Anyway, so there we were, and we had a kind of car that someone on a res just gave us. Here, guys, you need a car, So it wasn't insured. The tags were these Indian tags, meaning, the Indian nation has their own everything. So they have their own license plates, at least from the state that we came from. So no real cop, unless he had nothing to do, would bother. I mean, a car like that was basically invisible, and living on reses and hanging with T.O.M., I learned how to be invisible or be very visible, one or the other, right? So we were driving through New Mexico, and we were heading towards Grants, and we were going to go see some folk. And this is before I met Grandfather David, but they were in that same family, right? And so anyway, we're driving, on route whatever that was, 40 and we're out in the middle of nowhere, right? And the car kind of dies, right? And you never could tell. I mean, this thing had no idiot lights, and the gas gauge didn't work, and the odometer didn't work. So you had to guess, how much gas was in the tank and how many miles you had gone. There was no GPS, that's for sure. So we ran out of gas, and we were on this road that nobody, we sat by the side of the road, we ate some food that we had in the car, we smoked some medicine, and, we slept a little in a ditch, and it was one of those really beautiful nights, meaning like last night was here. Wasn't a cloud in the sky. There was a little bit of coldness. It wasn't winter yet, and we were, because we had to do all of this before Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving Council is when the consensus goes down on where the gathering is going to be. So anyway, we were sleeping in a ditch, and our car was pulled off to the side out of harm's way, and we tried to go to sleep, but we couldn't, and we just kept looking up at the sky. And this is one of the really major times. Like last night, I saw more stars up here than I have in a long time. It was so clear, and there was nothing getting in the way. And it was just like that. It was so clear, nothing got in the way. There were no clouds whatsoever. There was no light, no pollution. Nothing was getting in the way. And it was like, Vincent van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night, but even more. And then the stars started swirling. and I'm going, hey guys, can you see what was it that Chiba that look at that. What is that? And the whole sky started to swirl, right? And it turned into what they now, like if you were to watch Babylon 5, when they, open the gate and the spaceships fly through, right? That's what it kind of looked like, right? Without the gate, it just started to swirl, and then it became a vortex of energy. And we were like going, whoa, what is that, right? So we just lied there, in this ditch, kind of with our heads together, going in the 4 different directions. There were 4 of us. And basically, without really, we're going, wow, what is that? What is that? What is that? And then all of a sudden, we are miles out in the middle of this mesa, without remembering, like not even knowing where the heck, where's the car? Where's the road? Where are we? And we were like out in the middle of nowhere, nowhere near Grants, New Mexico, right? And near the Four Corners. And, we had no watches, no nothing. All you could tell, and T.O.M. was good at this, he could see the stars and where the moon was. There was no moon, so we didn't tell that, but where the stars were, he could roughly tell you where you were and how much time has passed since the last time he noticed where everything was. I mean, he was the dude, of all of us, right? So, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we are surrounded by sage. Now, I've, driven across the desert by then a lot, and, I actually was, I guess this is after I was in New Mexico working for Dick Powell Electric, after I was at Los Alamos and Sandias and Kirkland Air Force Base, and after I lived with Grandfather David. So we're out in the middle of nowhere, right? And so I walked through a lot of mesas, with miles and miles, because Grandfather David would walk me all over the place. And that's when I realized that the sage was like more than just a bush here and bush here. It was like a forest of sage, but it was only 3 or 4 feet high, right? I mean, when we kind of came to our conscious self, we were standing in the middle of this, and we were, miles from in any direction, and we were all, again, when we kind of were in that ditch, our heads were together, and we were all, because that's how we would sleep, in all 4 directions. And when we woke up, we were standing up, and we were each facing the 4 directions in the directions that we had been in sleep, right? So we walk through this, and I realize that we're out in the outback of where Grandfather David had his farm, and it had been, this time I left New Mexico and that existence in the beginning of 72. This was maybe 74 or 5 or 6. It wasn't 76 yet, before 1976. Or after, I'm not quite sure where it was. And we basically, again, bumped into Grandfather David, and he started laughing. And we went back to his farm, and the sweat lodge that Grandfather and I had built a number of years before this was still there. And so the 4 of us spent a good week of, sweating and doing ceremony with Grandfather David. And we had the vision of what is to come, and what would happen to the Rainbow family, and what the Rainbow family would be, and what, that soon the Hopi prophecy would be foretold and brought to the Rainbow family, and the family of the light. And that's what the Rainbow family was supposed to be, a rainbow. But right now, the Rainbow family is more or less a bunch of bourgeois white people. But it was supposed to be everybody, all our relations. That's what it's supposed to be. And it's not so much that now. But that doesn't mean that won't be what it is, because that's the beauty of the life that we exist in. We don't know what's going to come next. And instead of going, oh, I want to kill myself because it's not exactly the way it is, the way I want it to be. I'm not the movie star. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not this. No. Every day in every way, we take the piece of the earth and we make it stronger. And that's how we need to live our life, in service to love's co-creation, right? And that's what we saw, the 4 of us saw, right? We didn't understand how it was going to come to fruition. And from that point on, I became Sensei Al Bob, And a number of years, and, T.O.M. was the most healthy. I mean, he was in his 70s, and he was ripped. He was amazing because he didn't eat any meat. He totally ate out of dumpsters. He had been eating out of dumpsters since 1947. When he was in Vietnam, he ate out of garbage. Because he found the best food in the garbage, in the dumpster, right? And
those people are actually like homeless and they eat out of trash cans and they're happy.
yes, but because he was a king, he was a millionaire. He was living his life as a millionaire without having to be a millionaire, without having to worry about anything, worry about what was coming next, because he served. After he put his gun down, he served love's co-creation, and he did it in an organic way. Meaning he wasn't like me. I talk about it a lot as your griot, but he lived it. So he was a saint. I became the shaman. He was the saint. And Red Bear.
You don't have to be that homeless. You can just spend less money.
It's whatever it is. There is no like, hey, this is the manual on how to do that. And the only manual on how to do your life is in your heart. And the only way you can truly, and that's what alchemy does. As I was saying, alchemy takes, crass metals and turns them into gold. And the crass metal is us. We are a carbon-based element, and you can't get any more crass than carbon. Coal, right? Oil, carbon, right? And what is carbon? 666. 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, 6 protons. Human beings, the mud puppet, our avatar, we are the Antichrist. And look what we're doing to our planet. We are destroying it as the Antichrist. For what? For stuff, not for, service to love's co-creation, but to stuff, money, Now again, all of that stuff can be considered. We live in a material world. I need to wear a pair of jeans. I need to have a coat. It's a little cold. I'm not the saint yet that Tiom was, right? And I wasn't the warrior that Red Bear was. I'm the shaman. What is a shaman but a scholar, a scholar priest, a scholar, and I hate the word priest, and that's why I call myself a shaman. Just like I don't call myself I call myself I am a griot sensei, and my name is Owl Bob. And those names were given to me. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to be this, to be a shaman. When I ran this place as a mystic school, people would come, oh, I want to be a shaman. Here's $300. Just print me out a certificate saying that I'm a shaman. Because that's how they, got their, I'm a, I do Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. How do they get it? They online sent somebody a few $100 and they sent them back a piece of paper saying they were Reiki master, right?
But they had to do all that work.
No, they didn't do squat.
For Reiki?
No, you don't have to do. You go online and they send you some
There's
stuff.
a lot of those certificates and degrees and stuff that are really real.
Not really, but there's no real difference between.
You have to do a lot of work for them.
Not really, because if
Yeah.
have you ever read the Japanese man who invented Reiki? Did you ever read his book?
I'm saying degrees and.
Did you ever read his
certificates in
book? The man
general.
who invented, who discovered, who coined the phrase Reiki. Did you ever read that guy's book? He's got this little 27-page book. Did you ever read that? He basically says you don't have to go to school. There are no teachers. You are the Reiki master within. So you don't have to go to school.
In general?
No,
In school.
in reality. Bottom line. What you
School
do
is
have
very
to do.
hard to get a degree.
No, there is no degree in it.
You have to do a lot of
No,
work.
you
I'm saying
don't.
not
That's a
Reiki, I'm saying-
scam. That's
saying
education.
everything.
Going to school is a scam. They take your money and give you nothing. You have a
not what it
bachelor's
is.
degree and you have a master's degree,
There's a
right?
lot of relentless
So,
work that
so
I
what
did
what
one
value are those degrees to you right now, John? What are you using them for? I got more degrees than a thermometer, and I don't use them.
Film, and I worked on films. And
So what are you? Are you working on film now?
If I make my masterpiece feature film, it could be huge.
Yeah.
It would.
could
Well,
be
you've
huge.
already
And I know how
the
to
three
do it all.
films, the three features, weren't they your masterpieces? Wasn't Vampires of the Vanities your masterpiece?
Well, at the time, that was the best work it could possibly do.
Wasn't the one The Two of Us or whatever that film, wasn't that your masterpiece of you and Danica together?
Meant to be.
Yeah,
That was a short film.
wasn't that your
I wanna do the
masterpiece?
fe-
Yeah,
I wanna do the
don't
feature film,
cave
but
in
no,
my
no.
car.
The thing's almost out of batteries. You want to wrap up the story? Differing opinions on the value.
I
of
was
getting
telling the
degrees.
story until you kind of led me off another path, and that's what the griot does. The adept asks a question, and then I take the story down that path. So anyway, we were at Grandfather David's. We spent a week doing ceremony, and if you want to experience those ceremonies, if you want to experience everything that I've just told you over this hour and a half or whatever, come to my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you will experience
You went to schools
through
too,
a
right?
guided meditation.
You went to a bunch of schools.
Yeah, university.
Law schools,
Yeah.
So you're not against them.
No, I got paid to go to school. I was not only paid to go to school, I was given degrees, and not only was that, I was allowed to go into libraries that the average person can't go in. Meaning, Joe Public can't go in to the Smithsonian. Joe Public can't go into the library at Trinity in Dublin. Joe Public can't go into the library at the Council of Foreign Relations. Joe Public can't go into the buried libraries all around the world run by the World Bank.
It's about to run out of batteries.
Okay, kids, I love you. Remember, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob on my channel, and get a hold of me if you want to know anything. And I really respond to the Gmail, the dudeawake42@gmail.
Yeah, and
Say
like the video.
Yeah,
Like the video if you like the story. Subscribe to my channel. See more of Al Bob on my channel.
No,
Bye.
On John Birmingham's channel, it's John Birmingham's channel, and it's called Dream Time with Al. Not Al Bob. If you want to see Al Bob, if you want to see Al Bob, you have to go to my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. On what I am here on John Birmingham's
they're both
channel,
good. Go to
I am
both
Al.
channels.
I'm Al. This is
Yeah.
Dream Time with Al.
All right.
Dream Time with Al. Dream Time with Al.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.